Hi, I'm an old guy and I do maths. Today we're going to look at the idea of simple interest. Um, Now, simple interest is, quite simply put, the money that you earn on a sum of money on deposit at a bank or something like that. Um, it's very, very straightforward. For instance, you hand a bank $1,000 and they say, well, we'll pay you 10% every year. So at the end of a year, what you wind up with is 10% of the $1,000, which is $100 in interest. Um, we want to keep the idea for this, we want to keep the idea of interest and principal separate. If you don't understand the term principal, I'll go into that a little later. Okay, so let's start with the formula for simple interest. I equals P times R times T over 100. Now, I've set out what each of these things mean. I is the interest, so this is a formula that gives you the amount of interest that you'll earn. P is the principal. Now, principal is the amount that you deposit. It's the amount that you start out with. The rate is the interest rate which the bank or whatever financial institution, or indeed a person that you're lending money to, offers to pay you. And that's usually expressed as a percentage. And T is the time in years. This T here is the time in years. It can be what's called periods, but let's just, as we're starting out, let's just say years. And it's usually not expressed in years and months. So, for instance, 18 months would be 1.5 years. You can express it as years as a whole number and parts of a year as a fraction. So 1 year and 1 month would be 1 and 1/12. But just for the moment, let's keep it to whole numbers and say that T is the time in years. And the 100, which I should explain just for the sake of completeness, converts this to a percentage. It converts the answer that you get here, P times R times T, it converts it to a percentage so that you've got what you would regard as a meaningful number. So let's take an example. So let's say that you have $100 and your interest rate is 6%, and you're going to invest that for 1 year. We'll do this for 1 year, and then I'll do a calculation for 1.5 and 2 years. Okay. That's the principal, that's the rate, that's the time. So let's get our formula. I is equal to P times R times T over 100. So the amount of interest that you get is equal to the principal, 100, times the rate, 6. Now you put this in as 6, you don't write it as 0.06 or anything like that. If it's 6.5, it's 6.5. Times time, which is 1 year, 1 over 100. And the answer that we get is $6. handily these two numbers cancel, and so the answer is 6 times 1, $6. Okay, now hopefully that was clear. Now I'm going to redo this, and I'm going to change one thing. T equals 1. Okay, so the interest is going to equal the principal times the rate times the time over 100. So let's get to work. So principal is 100. The rate is 6.5, as I stated earlier, and time is 1, and that is all over 100. And so the answer is $6.50, $6.5. I hope that's clear. One more. What will we change? Let's change the time. So the principal equals 100. The rate equals, let's make it 12%. And the time equals 18 months, which I'm going to write as 18 months, but you'll see when I put it into the formula that I'll write it as 1.5. Okay, so let's get going. By now, hopefully you know the formula. So it is the principal 100 times the rate, which is 12, times the time, which is 1.5 years. Okay, and that's all over 100. And that's going to give me 100 times 12 times 1.5 divided by 100, which, if you want to, you can stick in a calculator. These two numbers will cancel quite handily, which is why I chose $100. 12 times 1.5 equals $18. That's how much interest you will get over that period. Now, that is simple interest. Okay, so there's one more thing to do, which is to take you through some variations on this formula. So let's do that now, because these are handy. Right. So the basic formula is interest is equal to principal times the rate times the time divided by 100. Now, let's say you knew how much interest had been earned, you knew what the rate was, and you knew what the time was, but you did not know what the principal was. Well, this is how you find it. These are worth noting down. If you're not comfortable manipulating formulas, these are worth noting down. So I'll just go through these quickly. The principal is equal to 100 times the interest divided by the rate times the time. The rate is equal to 100 times the interest. There's a theme here. Divided by the principal times the time. And the time is equal to 100 times the interest divided by the rate times the principal. Let's put one of these into action at least. Okay, so let's get the yellow pad and get to work. Okay, so we'll figure out what our principal was. Let's do that. So P is equal to 100 times I over the rate times the time. Okay. Now, let's say that our interest was $10 and our rate was 5%, and the time, we'll just make this easy, the time was 1 year. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to find out how much money we put on deposit in order to get $10 interest at 5% over 1 year. So let's just put the numbers into this. Okay. So P is equal to 100 times the interest, times the interest, which is 10, divided by 5 times 1. Now, again, I just wrote that as 5, not 0.05, not 5 over 100. You put the whole amount in. Okay, so what does that give us? Well, that gives us 1,000 divided by 5, which equals 200. So the amount of money that we put on deposit for 1 year at 5% in order to gain $10 of interest was $200. Now let's check that. Let's just put this all back into the general formula. So I equals PRT over 100. So we know what the interest is, but we'll just pretend we don't. So the principal in this case is 200. The rate is 5%. The time is 1. That's a 1. Sorry, I went to write T instead of 1. And we're going to divide that by 100. And what happens is we get 200 times 5, which is $1,000, times 1 divided by 100. So that's $1,000, 1,000, divided by 100, which equals $10. That's our interest earned. Okay, so that's the check. That's the check on this. And that is the basics with a few little embellishments of simple interest. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.